Hey heroes, welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description along with other places you can find me. Previously on the channel, we have looked at the origin and history of Lorna Dane, the green-haired mutant mistress of magnetism known as Polaris. We've talked about her parentage and the revelation that she is in fact the daughter of Magneto, the ups and downs of her relationship with Alex Summers, aka Havok, and their time together as members of the X-Men, as well as the government-sponsored version of X-Factor. We touched on how she was possessed by the marauder known as Malice, traumatized by the genocide on Genosha, depowered by the Scarlet Witch's reality warp on M-Day, and repowered when she became the Horseman of Apocalypse Pestilence. When we last left off, she had recovered from Apocalypse's brainwashing but was still learning to control her newly restored abilities. During this time, she was approached by Alex and Professor Xavier, who convinced her to join them on a mission into deep space. Havok's insane brother, Vulcan, was heading into the heart of the alien Shi'ar Empire, seeking vengeance for the death of his mother, Catherine Summers. We talked in depth about those events last week, so refer to that video for the full details. The one responsible for the tragedy that befell the Summers family, Emperor Tien, had already been defeated in an encounter with the X-Men years prior and rendered catatonic. You may recall that Polaris and Havok had their own encounter with Tien's forces when they were brainwashed into serving his agent Devon Shikari, aka Eric the Red. After his defeat, Tien was succeeded by his younger sister, Lilandra, who was an ally to the X-Men and was even married to Xavier for a time. And so with a rogue X-Man threatening her empire, Xavier assembled a team to stop him. The journey was a long one, and so during their downtime, Lorna had time to train with Xavier and another X-Man, Rachel Summers, Alex's niece from a different timeline. As a result of this training, Lorna learned to properly control her augmented abilities, and soon she was more powerful than ever. Meanwhile, the situation in space quickly grew more complicated as Vulcan joined forces with Lilandra's treasonous sister, Deathbird, and used his energy manipulation powers to revive Tien. While Xavier was captured by those loyal to Tien, Polaris, Havok, and the others joined forces with the Starjammers, a group of space pirates led by Havok's father, Christopher Summers, aka Corsair. They freed Lilandra from captivity at the hands of her brother's loyalists and worked together to oppose his rule. In the midst of this conflict, Lorna found herself drawn towards Alex once again, and when the two had a moment of downtime together, she passionately kissed him. Alex was understandably hesitant to get back together, and if you watched the previous Polaris video, then you'll have a good idea why. Lorna, however, reasoned that they were in the middle of a war and might never see Earth again. After that, Polaris, Havok, Lilandra, and the Starjammers launched an attack on Vulcan and Deathbird's wedding to rescue Xavier. During the battle, Vulcan killed Tien and usurped his position to become the new ruler of the Shi'ar Empire. When he attempted to eliminate Lilandra as well, his father Corsair intervened and was struck down instead. It was Polaris who finally got the upper hand over Vulcan, using her magnetic powers to crush his ribs with his own metal armor. Vulcan attempted to blast her away, but Havok shielded her with his own body. While not totally immune to his brother's powers, he survived by using his own ability to absorb most of the energy. Regardless, Vulcan and Deathbird were able to escape and begin cementing their control over the Empire. Lilandra, meanwhile, sent Xavier and several of the X-Men back to Earth with Corsair's lover, Hepzibah, but Polaris and Havok weren't with them. Along with Rachel Summers and the other Starjammers, they laid Corsair to rest on a planet that he and Hepzibah often visited. Alex then took his father's place as the leader of the Starjammers, and Lorna stayed by his side to oppose Emperor Vulcan. Alex was self-conscious and questioned his ability to defeat his brother, but Lorna was determined to support him. And during this time away from Earth, the two fully rekindled their relationship once again. Meanwhile, the Starjammers were forced into an uneasy alliance with Vulcan to combat an alien race called the Shi'ar. We also talked about them in the previous video, but they threatened the entire Shi'ar Empire with a device that could destroy entire planets. This foe was ultimately defeated, but Vulcan betrayed the Starjammers and captured most of them, including Polaris and Havok. They were imprisoned beneath the surface of the water planet Kirkan, but keeping them there would be more difficult than Vulcan anticipated. Likely as a result of her enhanced abilities and her time as Pestilence, Lorna continually shorted out the power-dampening collars that were placed on her and resisted the drugs that were used to sedate her. At one point, she awakened and nearly escaped, but was knocked out by Vulcan himself. She was kept more heavily sedated after that, but the next time she woke up, Alex had escaped and come to rescue her. They continued to clash with Vulcan's forces, but there didn't seem to be much hope of gaining the upper hand in a prolonged conflict. But then, the Inhuman royal family, a group of superhumans from Earth, assumed control of another interstellar empire, the Kree. Polaris had a familial connection to the Inhuman royals because her brother, Quicksilver, was formerly married to the Princess Crystal. While that marriage had been annulled by this point, Crystal's daughter Luna was still Lorna's niece, and so Polaris visited her former sister-in-law both to attend her wedding to the Kree accuser Ronan and to seek an alliance against Vulcan's Shi'ar. The latter became elementary when Vulcan sent the Imperial Guard to attack the ceremony, kicking off a war of kings. Lorna was naturally involved in this conflict as a member of the Starjammers and an ally to the Inhumans. While we may discuss this event in more detail another time, for now let's just touch on the broad strokes and spoil the ending. The Starjammers and their allies sought to restore Lilandra to the throne, and were even aided by Gladiator of the Imperial Guard, once he realized the extent of Vulcan's madness. However, these hopes were dashed when Lilandra was assassinated by a member of the ancient Fraternity of Raptors. The war finally came to an end with a battle between Vulcan and the Inhuman King Black Bolt. Both rulers were caught in the blast and seemingly killed when Black Bolt detonated the Inhumans' Terrigen bomb. The weakened Shi'ar Empire was then annexed by the Kree, and Gladiator reluctantly took over as Magister, serving under the Inhuman Queen Medusa. With Vulcan defeated, Lorna and Alex decided to leave the Starjammers, but not before attending the funeral of Lilandra Neramani. After that, they had one more adventure in space, during which they were mentally influenced into helping an insectoid race called the Gradnon-Hult rebel against the Shi'ar. They were saved when Rachel Summers sent a distress call back to Earth, summoning several X-Men to their aid, including Lorna's father, Magneto. In the aftermath of that battle, Lorna, Alex, and Rachel were finally returned to Earth. However, they soon learned that the X-Men were in the midst of a schism, with Cyclops and Wolverine butting heads over whether or not teenage mutants should be involved in dangerous combat situations. The X-Men essentially split into two separate groups, but Wolverine approached Lorna and Alex with a third option. As you may recall, Polaris and Havok were previously members of a government-sponsored mutant team, X-Factor, alongside their friend and ally Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man. While that version of the team ultimately disbanded, the name was later used by Madrox for his private detective agency, X-Factor Investigations. After Madrox was seemingly killed, Wolverine asked Lorna and Alex to take over as the leaders of this X-Factor, and the pair agreed. However, it wasn't long before the Multiple Man turned up alive, leading to some tension between him and Havok over leadership, while Polaris tried to keep the peace. Lorna was also happy to reunite with old allies like Rain Sinclair, aka Wolfsbane, and to befriend her new teammate Teresa Cassidy, who was formerly known as Siren but by this point had adopted her father's alias Banshee. Not long after that, on the anniversary of the plane crash that killed her mother, Lorna found herself thinking about her parents once again. As we talked about in previous videos, she was raised by the Danes after her real parents supposedly died in a plane crash. Her natural mutant abilities remained dormant even after reaching puberty, but as a young adult her powers were activated by the hypnotic mutant Mesmero. Joining forces with a robotic duplicate of Magneto, Mesmero tricked Lorna into believing that she was actually Magneto's daughter, unaware of the truth in this deception. While she ended up convinced that this wasn't the case, years later she performed a genetic test that confirmed the truth, that Magneto actually was her biological father. Furthermore, FAA records indicated that the wreckage of the plane crash that killed her mother was highly magnetized. She later tried to talk to Magneto about this, but he denied any culpability in the crash. Lorna was talking about this with her teammate Longshot and showed him a Polaroid picture that was found in the wreckage. When Longshot touched this picture, it triggered his psychometric ability to get psychic readings from objects. He didn't want to tell her what he saw, but Lorna convinced him and their telepathic teammate Monet St. Croix to combine their abilities and show her what really happened. She learned that her mother, Susanna, had cheated on her husband with Magneto, leading to Lorna's birth. She also learned that she was on the small private plane where the two were arguing about this affair. The stress of the situation caused the magnetic abilities that Lorna had inherited from her real father to manifest early. She was only 3 years old at the time, but lashed out with enough force to destroy the plane. Alerted by this magnetic outburst, Magneto investigated and found Lorna alive in the wreckage. To protect her from the truth, he had Mastermind use his power over mental illusions to suppress Lorna's memory of the crash and prevent her from using her abilities until she was older. This revelation sent Lorna into a mental breakdown, and she began to question if anything she knew was real. Wanting to help her friend and knowing that Lorna's power could threaten the Earth's magnetic field if she lost control of herself, Teresa Cassidy approached the Irish goddess Morrigan for aid. Tired of her station, the goddess agreed to help if Teresa would take on the mantle of Morrigan. Teresa accepted this, and the resulting Banshee cry awakened Lorna, who perceived it as the most beautiful song she had ever heard. However, she came to her senses only for her relationship with Alex to change again. Somewhere in the midst of all of this, Polaris and Havok were also drawn into a conflict involving the Avengers and the X-Men, which culminated in Cyclops being possessed by the Phoenix Force and murdering Professor Xavier. Unsure of his place in the world, Havok declared that he and Polaris would be leaving X-Factor. However, Lorna wasn't willing to let him dictate her life choices without even asking her, and elected to stay with the team. She designed a new green and purple costume, and the couple bid each other farewell before parting ways once again. After that, Polaris and X-Factor were drawn into a conflict between 6 Hell Lords, each of whom sought to dominate the realms of the others by fulfilling an ancient prophecy. This involved killing the person whose birth brought the Earth's population to 7 billion, which just so happened to be Wolfbane's son, Tien. This conflict came to an end when Lorna and Rain's longtime ally Strong Guy killed Tien himself and usurped control of the various hells. He undid the damage done to the world by the Hell Lords, and in the wake of this event, the various members of X-Factor were scattered across the globe, with Polaris ending up back in New York. Separated from her teammates and without an active crisis, she took to a nearby bar to drink her troubles away. When the bartender eventually tried to cut her off, a drunken, surly Lorna magnetically threw a pool table through the wall. This outburst naturally drew the attention of the authorities, and soon her brother, Quicksilver, arrived to take her into Avengers custody. The two siblings ended up fighting, with Polaris grabbing guns from nearby police officers and firing on her brother. Quicksilver, however, was fast enough to evade the bullets and ultimately succeeded in knocking his sister out. Or maybe Lorna just passed out because she was incredibly drunk. In either case, she was arrested and woke up in a jail cell, regretful of her actions. Then she was approached by a man named Harrison Snow, the CEO of Serval Industries. Having purchased the name X-Factor from Madrox, Snow wanted to assemble a privately owned version of the team. Getting her out of police custody, he offered to make Polaris the first member and leader of this all-new X-Factor, and after a thorough investigation of his company, she agreed. The truth behind Harrison Snow that she never learned is that he was a time traveler from the year 2099. You may recognize the timeline he originated from, Reality 928, as the same future world where Miguel O'Hara became Spider-Man. Snow came back in time with the goal of employing enough mutants and superhumans to destroy the newly formed Alchemax Corporation before it grew into the ever-present force of corruption that he knew in the future. Lorna's first recruit in the new X-Factor was Gambit, one of the mutants who came to her aid during the Grad-Non-Holt incident. The next member, Quicksilver, actually came to her because he was concerned about her following their last encounter. Over time, this group's roster was rounded out by the addition of the artificial lifeform Danger, the omnilingual mutant Cypher, and his techno-organic alien ally, Warlock. Together, this team faced a number of foes, including Warlock's Technarch father, Magus, a supervillain called Memento Mori, and the soul-eating Egyptian goddess, Ammit. However, their ultimate task of taking down Alchemax never came to pass because then came the end of the world. A series of incursions between realities was causing various parallel Earths to crash into each other, annihilating their respective universes in a cascading series of events that would eventually destroy the entire multiverse. The reasons for this are somewhat complicated, involving Doctor Doom and the Beyonders, but I covered the details in my video about the Molecule Man if you're interested. When the Earth we know threatened to collide with the only other remaining Earth in the multiverse, Polaris joined forces with her father in an attempt to repel it and save their reality. The pair were attacked by Sentinels from that other world, the Ultimate Universe, but Magneto betrayed his daughter, draining her power to fuel his own in a last-ditch effort to stop this incursion. However, in the end, he failed, and both worlds were destroyed along with most of reality. Fortunately, Doctor Doom was able to preserve the last broken scraps of the multiverse, and thanks to the efforts of Mr. Fantastic and other surviving heroes, reality was eventually restored to its proper state after another Secret Wars. Resurrected along with the world, Lorna reunited with her father once again, although she was understandably hesitant to trust him. During this time, Magneto had decided to watch over and mentor a group of young, temporarily displaced X-Men who had been brought forward in time from the team's early days. In the midst of this, there was a Hydra takeover of the United States government, which they accomplished by creating a fascistic version of Steve Rogers with a cosmic cube, and using him as a figurehead. Under this regime, Emma Frost and Shen Zorn negotiated for the establishment of a sovereign mutant republic, New Tien. The young time-displaced X-Men discovered that dissidents of this new regime were imprisoned and worked to free them. This put them into conflict with the leader of New Tien's strike force, Havok, but they were saved by Polaris, who intervened and handily defeated her ex. It should be noted that since their breakup, Alex had been affected by an inversion spell that altered his morality, making him distinctly more villainous. In any event, Hydra's control over the United States was eventually overthrown, largely thanks to the re-emergence of the real Captain America, who defeated his fascist doppelganger. In the aftermath of all that, not wanting to repeat his past mistakes, Magneto asked Lorna to help him guide the young X-Men and challenge his methods of maintaining order, to which she agreed. However, both she and Magneto fell out of contact with them when the time-displaced students joined Venom on a mission into deep space. It also seems that between the Incursions and a battle with Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, a number of refugees from other universes were transported to the reality we know, henceforth called the Prime Earth. One of these was a version of the psionic entity Malice, who, much like her Prime Universe counterpart, possessed and took control of Polaris. However, it seems that this Ultimate Universe Malice was significantly less powerful than the one Lorna had already encountered. Lorna quickly regained control over her body, but inadvertently killed this other Malice in the process. Meanwhile, the still inverted Alex joined Emma Frost, Miss Sinister, and Bastion in a scheme to make mutants the dominant species on Earth using a power-inducing virus called Mothervine, also originally from the Ultimate Universe. They invited Magneto to be a part of this plan, but he already learned that the secondary mutations that Mothervine endowed mutants with often came with terrible side effects. With the time-displaced X-Men still off in space, a new blue team was assembled to combat this threat with Polaris at the forefront. This group also included Jimmy Hudson, a son of Wolverine from the Ultimate Universe, Daken, Wolverine's son from the Prime Universe, Bloodstorm, a vampiric version of Aurora Monroe from a parallel reality, Gazing Nightshade, a mutant vigilante who previously operated in Madripoor, and the aforementioned Shen Zorn. Joined by Emma Frost, who realized that she was on the wrong side of this conflict, Polaris and her team prevented Mothervine from being unleashed and defeated Bastion. Lorna and Emma were also able to psionically reach into Havok's mind and undo the inversion spell that flipped his morality, restoring him to his true self. That squad was disbanded in the wake of that mission, but not long after, Lorna joined an uncanny team assembled by Jean Grey and fought alongside many other veteran X-Men. This team clashed with the powerful mutant Nate Grey, otherwise known as X-Man, who wanted to use his abilities to transform the world into a sociological and ecological paradise before he died, but at the cost of thousands of lives. As a result of this conflict, Polaris was among those who were held prisoner in a pocket reality created by X-Man. Soon enough, the Age of X-Man came to an end and the displaced X-Men were returned to their proper reality. Not long after that, Magneto and a resurrected Xavier completed an ambitious secret project to establish a peaceful mutant nation on the living island, Krakoa. One of the cornerstones of this new nation was the ability to bring dead mutants back to life by transferring their recorded consciousness into a cloned body. Of course, to prevent any unwanted duplication complicating things, they had to ensure proof of death before any recently deceased mutants could qualify for resurrection. For this purpose, X-Factor Investigations was rebooted, and Lorna Dane once again became a member. Later, at the first Krakoan Hellfire Gala, a psychic vote was held to determine who would represent their country as active members of the X-Men. Polaris attempted to vote against herself, but Jean Grey knew that her first impulse was to want to be chosen, and counted that as a vote in her favor. As such, Lorna Dane became a member of the primary X-Men team once again. But whether she's an X-Man, a Starjammer, or an X-Factor investigator, Polaris continues to fight for her friends, her family, and for the future of mutant kind. But that is all I have for you this week, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me again give a special shout out to all my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. Patreon is the one where you can vote in monthly polls that decide what topics get covered on the channel, but I do need options to populate those polls, so be sure to let me know what hero or villain you want to hear about in the comments below. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!